Cannery Museum is looking to expand this summer thanks to some federal funding. And as Scott Randolph reports, the 125-year-old site is looking to bring a part of the past back to life.
North Pacific Cannery Village Museum has plans to reestablish another part of its past this coming summer. The museum's society and staff have put together a proposal to rebuild some of the native village which once stood on the site.
Yeah, the native people, of course, First Nations people played a huge role in the development of this site. It's not a story of cans and salmon out here, but it's really a story of the people that came together around the salmon and all the different cultures and their histories. And here we had people coming from various nations. The Tsimshian, of course, were on their traditional territory, but in addition to that, you had the Gitxaanwit-Tsuut'in, the Nisga'a, the Haida, all gathering together here, combining together with the other nations, Japanese, Chinese, Europeans, and living and working together.
And work they did. The generations of First Nations that lived seasonally at the site worked mainly on processing the salmon brought to its docks until the Japanese internment during World War II, which led to getting into the harvesting end as well. Unfortunately, photographs and memories are about the only thing that have survived, as the management housing is all that is left standing.
The management housing fell to the Europeans. The Europeans were the owners and the bosses for the most part, and so they lived in the center of the site, in the best houses and the best preserved houses. Those houses were well maintained. Everything else, all the other people groups tended to live in more temporary shelter, if you will. I mean, there were homes, but and so the fact that only the white housing remains is a story in and of itself, which is why we don't want to recreate the entire village. We want to just put enough of it back that people get a sense of what's there, but also what was lost.
North Pacific Society has sought funding for the First Nations Village project from the federal government.
We're actually partnering with two federal agencies, one through Western Economic Diversification and a local chapter of Community Futures here in the Northwest. We have the proposal with them. We're also partnering with Parks Canada, who are coming on board in a 4-year time frame to do partnership and matching dollars for our First Nations Village project.
If successful, the two proposals will fetch about $750,000.
What that does is it brings back to the site a few original houses, not original to North Pacific, but honest to goodness original native houses, and then also puts a boardwalk out to them and then refurbishes the machine shop building, which is behind us.
The same building will be the home of a First Nations interpretive center. In the past, the Cannery Village Museum has had problems securing funding for maintenance and expansion, but that tune seems to have changed.
In the last 2 years, funding agencies that have been closed to us have been opened up, and they're starting to look at us and they're starting to get excited, which has buoyed me. I mean, I've been involved since 1992, and looking at this place, looking around, I mean, the changes since 1992 are huge.
As for further expansion of North Pacific, the First Nations Village is just the beginning.
We have spent years on the site doing restoration, restorative work on existing buildings, and we've been battling with that, and we figured that we have a good hold on looking after the buildings that exist here now. And it's about time that we start interpreting other areas that were once here on the site, and an ideal place to start was the First Nations Village.
To date, what we've been doing is trying to preserve and protect existing housing, and we've been very reluctant to add anything because it's all we can do to preserve what we have. But we've always had in mind that we would get good representation, good artifacts, good touchstones, these buildings, of the various nations that were here. And so we are looking at having as many as 5 houses from the First Nations village located there. We're also in the process of developing a project around the Chinese housing and a project around the Japanese people that were here. And so those become the cornerstones, really, of the story we want to tell here at North Pacific.
on the beautiful Skeena River, a major salmon route. Just as the salmon was a staff of life for the First Nations people, it also drew Europeans to the area. And in the 1800s, cannery owners from Europe heard all about the bounty of northern BC, and they came. Today, what remains of the huge salmon canning industry is the Northern Pacific Cannery Historic Site. Now, Herb, tell me about the cannery here.
Well, it's a 100-year-old cannery village where groups of people, Chinese, Japanese, native people, and whites all came together to can salmon here on the mighty Skeena River.
Wow, it's been around for a while?
It's been around actually since 1889 and operated through until 1968, so quite a history of canning salmon.
Yeah.
Survived because it's by the railroad here, and people lived on the site and worked on the site. There were stores, churches, school, everything right here.
It's kept in such good shape. This is Herb Pond, and he is the CEO of the Northern Pacific National Historic Site, and we say that because it encompasses so much here, a museum, a village. We can get a tour of the plant shortly.
Sure.
Lots of stuff in there.
Yep.
Now, during its peak operating time, how many people worked here? I guess it was just
You had
really
up to 1,000
populated.
people here living on the site, mostly seasonal workers, but coming down from the villages, coming in to work for the summer canning season.
Isn't that amazing? And they came from all over. You're saying, you know,
Everywhere.
Asia.
Yeah, we shared, as a matter of fact, the Chinese workers, when the railroad came in, were shared with the railroad. Of course, they'd work at certain times of the year with the railroad and work the other times of the year on the canning lines.
And how, just briefly, how did the railroad affect the cannery?
Massive change because the first settlement in the area was by the waterways.
Okay.
Wherever it was advantageous by water, that's where things were settled. The first land-based access into this area was by rail in 1914, and so those canneries, which happened to be on the railway side of the river, were the ones that survived.
Very prosperous, I imagine.
Yes.
All right, well, I think we should take a look at the plant
I'd love to show you.
and check it out.
All right.
Okay. Okay, so I'm imagining 100 years ago, I've just brought in a net with 10, 20, 30 salmon. We've brought the salmon in for processing. How does it go from here?
Well, 1889, you'd be standing here, and in fact, you would probably be a native woman, and I would be a Chinese man, and we'd be working at this table. We'd be wearing these because it's awfully messy.
Awfully messy.
And here we would be ripping off the guts. We would be cutting off the heads.
Hold on, you're painting a really interesting picture here. Okay.
Okay, and the tails would be flying off, and we'd probably be looking across the table falling in love with each other.
Oh,
right here.
My heart is pounding on my shirt. Okay, continue.
Whole down to the beach where everything went. And you can imagine at the end of the day...
Oh, it went right down?
Right down to the beach, sat at the beach. Of course, outhouses went onto the beach at those days. 1,000 people living on the site. Low tide was not a pretty smell.
Okay.
All right.
I'm really getting the idea.
Graphic images.
Very graphic. So we take it from here. We have no head, no tail.
And
no guts. Take it up and no guts.
And off she comes to the sliming tank.
The sliming tank.
Isn't that a wonderful name?
I love it. I love it already.
This tank was filled at the beginning of a shift.
Okay.
And all day long, they would clean the slime off of the meat of the fish, and then they would take it further on down. This water was not changed through the course of the day. So you can imagine towards the end of the day, it was not a very pretty sight.
It wasn't a pretty sight or pretty smell.
No.
Now, from there, we've de-slimed it. Is that correct? And then take me a few machines down.
All right. A little further down would be cut into chunks.
Okay.
A little further down from there, cans would be brought in, and native women working very quickly, filling cans at an extremely fast rate, 3 or 4 trays a minute.
Wow.
And a tray had about 24 cans.
In its heyday, this cannery was a community unto itself, right on the edge of what is now Prince Rupert. So this is the village.
Yeah, this is where the workers lived. Here in the center, you had mostly the white European housing.
Okay.
And, you know, typical of the sites and sites like it, it was the best built and best preserved housing, so it's what's left here on the site.
Wow, and so how many people sort of lived in this village?
Well, up to 1,000. You had Japanese down at one end, Chinese at the far end, and also a native village down at the far end as well.
Wow, and I noticed that these houses are up on stilts.
Yeah, pilings, all of them up on pilings, both on the land side, in fact, and on the water side, because we're in a tidal zone. We've got about 25-foot tides here, and particularly once the railway came in, the amount of waterside land was very squeezed.
Wow, and I guess everybody sort of, was it pretty diversified in terms of little communities, or did people get together and work?
Both. You know, people lived together largely because they cooked together and did those kinds of things and foods that were familiar. But when time came to play, they all played together. The kids went to school together, the church was mingled, and you know, Saturday nights they'd take the net loft and clear the nets aside and have big dances.
Oh, you're kidding.
And again, more romance on the boardwalks right here.
Always romance.
People would be talking, yeah.